Okay, so now we're ready to discuss multiplying and then eventually dividing rational expressions, or in other words, algebraic fractions. The key to multiplying is the understanding that we take the product. We multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and then typically reduce. So an example of that with some numbers, consider the multiplication problem, 15 over 20 times 8 over 9. All right, and we can just multiply across the top. 15 times 8 is 120. 20 times 9 is 180. All right, and then begin to simplify that fraction. Because it's 120 over 180, we can divide 10 out of both, get 12 over 18. And then 12 over 18, we can take a 6 out of both and get our answer 2/3. Now that's probably not how most of you learned to multiply fractions. That's the idea. In practice, though, we often find it easier to do the reducing before we multiply. So the word between the two there is do that multiplication and reduce. That doesn't mean we have to multiply first, though. We can do reduce ahead of time, and that's often what we do. So with 15 over 20 and 8 over 9, we look for something common in the top and bottom to divide out. So for instance, we could take a 3 out of both the 15, which would leave us a 5, and a 3 out of the 9, which would leave us with a 3. We could take a 4 out of the 8, which would leave us with a 2, and a 4 out of the 5, or 20, which would leave us with a 5. And then sometimes students kind of get wrapped up in the idea that they have to cancel from different fractions. As long as it's in the top and as long as it's in the bottom, you can cancel it out. It doesn't matter whether it's in the same fraction or different fractions, as long as you're dividing the same thing out of the top as you are out of the bottom. So we can also cancel those 5s out. And now you see that we're left with nothing else to cancel out. So we multiply across the top. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3, and we get the answer 2/3. So generally in practice we find it easier to simplify first and then put everything together. And that's actually going to be the same thing with these algebraic fractions. Consider this first example. 3x plus 3 over 2 times 4 over 12x plus 12. And so we want to do our reducing first. Well, as we learned in the previous section, to reduce, we need to factor. So I would ask you to take a moment, pause the video, and go ahead and factor everything in the top, everything in each fraction, both top and bottom. Okay, so when we do our factoring, we find that for the first fraction, 3x plus 3, we can pull out a common factor and have 3 times x plus 1. The 2 in the bottom we can't do anything about right now. Same thing with the 4 in the top for the second fraction. In the bottom we have a 12x plus 12. We can pull a 12 out of each, and you have 12 times x plus 1. At this point we look for stuff that we can cancel out. So real big is that x plus 1 that's in both top and bottom. So we can cancel that out. We then see that I have a 3 in the top and a 12 in the bottom, so I can cancel a 3 out of each of those. And then I see that I have a 4 in the top and a 4 in the bottom, so I can cancel each of those out as well. And at this point I have nothing left that I can cancel out, so I go ahead and simplify. 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 1 is 2, and so I get the answer of 1/2. So this is kind of an introduction to multiplying fractional expressions. In the upcoming videos we'll do some further examples of multiplying, and then also get into some examples of division. You're going to find, though, as you're doing these problems, that the big part of the work is all the factoring that you'll have to do. These problems could be as much as twice the amount of factoring you had to do in the section when you're simplifying fractions, because now you have 2 fractions to deal with. And so we'll continue with some examples. But it's all going to, again, come down to how well you're able to factor, because that's the work step of these problems.